Ambassador Sarah Chun stood at the massive viewing window of Diplomatic Station Harmony, watching the swirling nebula beyond cast purple and gold light across the metal corridors. For 3 months, she had walked these halls, speaking with beings from 47 different species, all trying to find a way for humanity to join the Galactic Council without bloodshed. Today, it would all come to an end. The council chamber stretched before her like a vast amphitheater, with representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy arranged in carefully organized sections. The Zephyrians occupied the highest tier, their crystalline forms catching and refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns. Below them sat the Karath Empire, their reptilian delegates wearing ceremonial armor that gleamed like oil. The insectoid Vex collective chittered among themselves in the middle sections, while the aquatic hydrants remained in their specialized water-filled observation pods. At the center of it all sat the Council of Five, the most powerful civilizations that had ruled galactic politics for over 10,000 years. They had invited humanity here not as equals, but as subjects to be judged. Sarah walked to the small platform designated for the human delegation. Behind her, General Marcus Reed adjusted his dress uniform, while Dr. Elena Vasquez clutched a datapad containing humanity's final proposal. There were 3 humans facing the combined might of thousands of civilizations, but Sarah felt no fear. She had been chosen for this role because she understood something the galaxy had forgotten. Humans were different. Council Speaker Thexvar, a towering Zephyrian whose crystal body pulsed with internal light, raised one of his 4 arms for silence. The chamber fell quiet, the only sound the gentle hum of life support systems and the distant splash from the hydropods. We gather today to conclude negotiations with the species that calls itself humanity, Thexvar announced, his voice carrying through the chamber's translation systems in dozens of different languages. For 93 standard cycles, we have observed their rapid expansion across their local stellar region. In this time, they have claimed 17 star systems, established colonies on 43 worlds, and demonstrated technological advancement that concerns many council members. Sarah listened to the translation in her earpiece, noting how they describe humanity's growth as concerning rather than impressive. The galaxy had taken thousands of years to achieve what humans had accomplished in less than a century. But instead of admiration, this had earned them suspicion. The Council has spent considerable time reviewing humanity's petition for membership, continued Thexvar. We have examined their governmental structures, their military capabilities, their cultural practices, and their stated intentions for future expansion. After careful deliberation, we have reached a decision. The chamber remained silent, but Sarah could feel the tension building. She had spent months reading the body language of different species, learning to interpret the subtle signs of agitation, anticipation, or hostility. Right now, she sensed all 3. The Galactic Council finds that humanity's expansion rate and military buildup represents a potential threat to galactic stability, Thexvar declared. Their rapid technological advancement, combined with their aggressive colonization efforts, and their species' documented history of warfare, makes them unsuitable for council membership at this time. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward slightly, but Sarah raised a hand to stop her. This was expected. The real terms were coming next. However, Thexvar continued, the Council recognizes that humanity has achieved significant technological and social development. Therefore, we extend the following offer. Humanity may continue to exist under the guidance and protection of the Galactic Council. You will be granted protectorate status under the joint administration of the Karath Empire and the Vex Collective. The terms flowed from Thexvar's translation device, like poison disguised as medicine. Humanity would be allowed to keep their current colonies, but under alien oversight. All military vessels larger than patrol boats would be decommissioned. Human expansion would be limited to 3 additional star systems over the next 500 years. All advanced research would be conducted under Council supervision. Earth itself would host permanent monitoring stations staffed by Council observers. In exchange, humanity would receive protection from hostile alien species, access to certain approved galactic technologies, and limited trading rights within Council space. Sarah had expected this. It wasn't membership they were offering, it was surrender disguised as protection. The alternative, HFY said, his crystal form darkening slightly, is that humanity will be classified as a hostile expansionist species. The Council would be forced to take measures to contain the threat you represent to galactic peace. That was the stick behind the carrot. Accept protectorate status and become a client species, or face the combined military might of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations. General Reed's hand instinctively moved toward where his sidearm would normally be, though weapons were forbidden in the chamber. Sarah could see the anger building in his face, the same anger that had driven him through 3 colonial wars and made him one of humanity's most decorated officers. But this wasn't a problem that could be solved with tactics and courage. Council Speaker, Sarah said, stepping forward to the small podium that had been provided for human use. I thank you for this generous offer. However, I must request time to consult with my government before providing an official response. Time is a luxury we cannot afford, interrupted Karath War Commander Vectar, his scarred reptilian face twisting into what might have been contempt. Your species has already demonstrated its inability to control its own expansion. Every day you delay is another day your fleets grow stronger and your colonies spread further into space that rightfully belongs to established civilizations. Rightfully, Dr. Vasquez couldn't help herself, taking a step forward despite Sarah's earlier gesture. These are empty systems, uninhabited worlds. How can you claim ownership of space you've never even visited? A chorus of angry chittering arose from the Vex Collective section, while several Hydron pods began flashing warning colors. The concept of claiming empty space clearly struck a nerve. The galaxy operates under established territorial agreements, explained Counselor Hithran of the Vex Collective, her compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights like black jewels. These systems fall within expansion zones allocated to Council species over millennia of careful planning. Your species' ignorance of galactic law does not grant you permission to violate it. Galactic law that was written before we even achieved spaceflight, General Reed added grimly. Laws we had no voice in creating. Precisely, Fexvar replied, apparently missing the human anger in Reed's tone. Established species must guide younger ones for the good of all. This is how galactic civilization has maintained peace for 10,000 years. Sarah looked around the chamber, studying the faces and body language of the assembled representatives. Some showed genuine concern, others barely concealed hostility, but most displayed the kind of condescending patience that adults might show to children who didn't understand why they couldn't have candy for dinner. That was the real problem. To them, humanity wasn't a potential equal or partner. They were unruly children who had gotten hold of dangerous toys and needed to be managed by their betters. I understand the Council's position, Sarah said carefully, and I appreciate the concern for galactic stability. However, humanity has always believed that peace is best maintained between equals, not between masters and subjects. Our history has shown us that forced protection often becomes indistinguishable from oppression. Your history, Vectar sneered, is one of constant warfare and destruction. You have spent your entire existence fighting each other over scraps of land on a single world. What makes you think you're qualified to participate in galactic governance? Sarah smiled at that, and something in her expression made several nearby representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats or breathing apparatus. Our history of warfare is exactly what qualifies us, War Commander, she replied. We've learned through blood and loss and terrible mistakes what the cost of peace truly is. We know that real peace can't be imposed from above. It has to be earned, defended, and constantly renewed by people who understand that freedom and security are not opposites, but partners. Philosophy is irrelevant. Hithran clicked dismissively. The Council's offer is generous beyond precedent. Most species at your technological level would be grateful for such protection. And what happens to species that decline your protection? Dr. Vasquez asked. The chamber fell silent. Even the background hum of life support seemed to fade as the question hung in the air. There are protocols, Thexvar said finally, for dealing with hostile species that threaten galactic stability. Sarah nodded slowly. I see. And how many species have you had to apply these protocols to? 17. Vectar answered with what sounded like pride. In each case, the threat was neutralized efficiently and with minimal disruption to established civilizations. Neutralized, Sarah repeated. You mean destroyed. Rendered unable to threaten galactic peace, Thexvar corrected. The Council takes no pleasure in such actions, but sometimes the needs of many must outweigh the desires of few. General Reed's face had gone very still, the way it did before he made decisions that would change the course of battles. Dr. Vasquez was staring at her datapad, probably calculating the odds of human survival against the combined Council fleets. But Sarah felt something else entirely, a cold, crystalline clarity that reminded her why she had been chosen for this assignment. I need to ask a question that may seem strange, Sarah said. In your 10,000 years of galactic peace, how many new species have been admitted to full Council membership? The representatives exchanged glances, some looking confused by the apparent change of subject. Admission to the Council is a complex process, Thexvar replied. Species must demonstrate cultural, technological, and social maturity over extended periods. Full membership requires unanimous consent from existing Council species. How many? Sarah pressed. In the last 3,000 years, 4 species have achieved full membership status, Hithran admitted. For species in 3,000 years, Sarah mused. And how many have been offered protectorate status? Approximately 4,700, Vectar answered. So less than 0.1% of protectorate species ever achieve full membership, Dr. Vasquez said, her voice carrying clearly in the suddenly quiet chamber. The requirements for advancement are clearly defined, Thexvar insisted. Any protectorate species that demonstrates sufficient development may petition for elevation. After how long? Sarah asked. The minimum evaluation period is 500 standard years, Hithran replied. Most species require considerably longer to reach the necessary maturity levels. Sarah walked to the edge of the human platform, looking up at the towering ranks of alien representatives. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You're offering humanity a deal where we surrender our sovereignty, accept permanent oversight of our expansion and development, submit to having our military capabilities reduced to essentially nothing, and in exchange we get the privilege of waiting 500 years for the chance to maybe be considered for a process that has a success rate of less than 0.1%. The success rate is low because most species are not suited for the responsibilities of Council membership, Thexvar explained patiently. The system has maintained galactic peace for millennia. Peace for whom? General Reed asked quietly. The question seemed to confuse several representatives. Peace was peace, their expressions seemed to say. What did it matter for whom? Peace for everyone. Counselor Merthak of the Hydrons gurgled through his translation unit. The Council maintains order and prevents the chaos that would result from unregulated expansion and development. Sarah looked around the chamber one more time, memorizing faces and postures and the casual arrogance that permeated everything about this place. These beings genuinely believed they were offering humanity a generous gift. They couldn't conceive of a species that would prefer dangerous freedom to comfortable servitude. Council Speaker, Sarah said formally, I thank you for your time and consideration. I will convey your offer to the human government and provide their response within 72 standard hours. That is acceptable, Thexvar agreed. However, I must emphasize that this offer will not remain open indefinitely. The Council has other concerns that require attention. Understand completely, Sarah replied. She gestured to her small delegation, and together they walked from the chamber under the watchful eyes of thousands of aliens who considered themselves humanity's betters. In the corridor outside, Dr. Vasquez finally exploded. 500 years. They want us to wait 500 years just for the chance to maybe be considered for membership that they've only granted to 4 species in 3 millennia? Elena, Sarah said calmly, lower your voice. These walls have very good acoustics. General Reed was studying his wrist display, probably reviewing intelligence reports on Council military capabilities. The offer is surrender, he said quietly. Dressed up with diplomatic language, but still surrender. They're asking us to disarm ourselves and place our trust in beings who just admitted they've neutralized 17 species for the crime of refusing to submit. Worse than that, Dr. Vasquez added, checking her calculations again. If you look at their expansion requirements, they're offering to let us colonize 3 star systems over 500 years. At our current growth rate, we'll need at least 20 new star systems in the next century just to handle population pressure. Sarah nodded, unsurprised. They're not just asking us to surrender our freedom. They're asking us to accept a slow death by stagnation. They reached the human quarters, a small section of the station that had been modified to accommodate their atmospheric and gravitational needs. The moment the door sealed behind them, General Reed activated a privacy screen that would prevent electronic surveillance. What's the real situation back home? Sarah asked. Reed consulted his secure communication device. Construction of a new defense platforms is ahead of schedule. Admiral Patterson reports that the fleet modifications are complete and all colonial militias have been activated. Intelligence indicates that the Council believes our military strength is approximately 30% of what it actually is. And our other preparations? Dr. Kim's team completed the project 6 days ago, Dr. Vasquez reported. All colony ships are equipped and ready for immediate deployment. If we activate the contingency plan, we can have 50,000 people beyond current human space within 2 weeks. Sarah walked to the small window in their quarters, looking out at the nebula that dominated the view. Somewhere beyond that swirl of gas and dust lay human space. 17 star systems that our species had claimed not through conquest or ancient treaty, but through the simple courage of climbing into metal tubes and flying into the unknown. They think they know us, she said quietly. They've studied our history, our culture, our technology. They think they understand what humans are and what we're capable of. But they've made one critical error. What's that? Reed asked. Sarah turned back to face them, and both her companions saw something in her expression that made them suddenly glad they were on humanity's side. They think our history of warfare makes us dangerous, she said. They're right, but not in the way they imagine. Our history of warfare taught us something that none of these species seem to understand. There are things worth fighting for, and things worth dying for, and sometimes the only way to preserve what you value is to be willing to lose everything in its defense. Dr. Vasquez looked at her data pad one more time. The math is terrible, Sarah. Even with our hidden capabilities, we're talking about 47 major civilizations against one. Some of their individual species have populations in the trillions. They have technology we're still trying to understand. They have territories spanning thousands of star systems. By any rational calculation, resistance is suicide. You're absolutely right, Sarah agreed. By any rational calculation, we should accept their offer, integrate into their system, and hope that maybe our great-great-grandchildren might someday achieve something approaching the freedom we were born with. But, General Reed prompted. Sarah smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. But humans have never been particularly rational when it comes to freedom. We have a long history of making very poor mathematical decisions when faced with tyranny dressed up as protection. She activated her own communication device and began composing a message that would travel through quantum entanglement across hundreds of light years to reach Earth in a matter of hours. What are you telling them? Dr. Vasquez asked. The truth, Sarah replied as she typed. That we've been offered a choice between comfortable slavery and dangerous freedom, and that the Council has made it clear what happens to species that choose freedom. And our recommendation? Sarah paused in her typing, thinking of home. Earth, with its blue oceans and white clouds and 7 billion people who had never bowed to alien masters. The colony worlds where human children were growing up under foreign stars, building something new and precious and entirely their own. That we thank the Council for clarifying our options, she said, resuming her typing, and that we choose to remain human. When a message was complete, she sent it with the encryption codes that would identify it as a priority alpha communication requiring immediate attention from the highest levels of government. Then, she turned back to the window and the nebula beyond. In 72 hours, she would return to the Council chamber and deliver humanity's response. But first, she had to give her own species time to prepare for what was coming. Because the galaxy was about to learn something that Sarah had known from the moment she accepted this assignment. Humans had not spent their entire history fighting each other to learn how to surrender to aliens. They had spent their entire history fighting each other to learn how to fight. And they had gotten very, very good at it. The secure chamber beneath the Terran Defense Headquarters had been built to withstand direct nuclear strikes, but the tension inside felt heavy enough to crack its reinforced walls. President Maria Santos sat at the head of an oval table surrounded by the most powerful people in human space. Fleet Admiral Patterson, Secretary of Defense Johnson, Intelligence Director Hayes, and Dr. Amanda Kim, whose recent breakthrough had changed everything. The holographic display at the center of the table showed Ambassador Chen's face, transmitted across hundreds of light years from Diplomatic Station Harmony. She had just finished delivering her full report on the Council's ultimatum, and the silence that followed spoke volumes about humanity's mood. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, President Santos said finally. They want us to surrender our sovereignty, dismantle our military, accept permanent oversight of our development, and wait 500 years for the privilege of maybe being considered for membership in a club that has admitted 4 new members in the last 3,000 years. That's correct, Madam President, Chen replied through the quantum communication link. And if we refuse, they've made it clear that they'll classify us as a hostile species and take measures to neutralize the threat we represent. Admiral Patterson leaned forward, his weathered face grim. What's their timeline for our response? 47 hours remaining, Chen answered. Council Speaker Thexvar made it clear that this offer won't remain open indefinitely. Secretary Johnson pulled up intelligence reports on his tablet. Our analysis of their military capabilities is sobering. The Karath Empire alone has over 12,000 heavy warships. The Zephyrians have weapons that can destabilize stars. The Vex Collective has hive mind coordination that makes their fleets function like single organisms. Combined, they represent overwhelming force. On paper, Director Hayes added quietly. But paper doesn't always tell the whole story. President Santos turned to Dr. Kim, who had been unusually quiet since the briefing began. Amanda, your team's work has been classified above top secret for 6 months. I think it's time everyone in this room understood exactly what we're capable of. Dr. Kim stood and activated her own holographic display. The image that appeared showed what looked like a standard cargo container, unremarkable in every way. Project Prometheus, she announced. For the past 18 months, my team has been working on a theoretical problem. How do you fight an enemy with vastly superior numbers and technology? The answer, it turns out, is that you don't fight them the way they expect to be fought. The container in the display opened, revealing what looked like a metallic sphere about the size of a basketball. This is a self-replicating manufacturing unit powered by what we call aggressive molecular assembly. It's designed to land on asteroids, moons, or uninhabited planets and begin building copies of itself using available materials. Admiral Patterson studied the display intently. How many copies? Each unit can produce 8 functional copies of itself every 72 hours, Dr. Kim replied. The copies can then begin their own production cycles. Mathematical progression means that a single unit becomes over 16 million units in 36 days. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. What do they build besides copies of themselves? President Santos asked. Dr. Kim smiled grimly. Whatever we program them to build. Defensive platforms, attack drones, sensor networks, manufacturing facilities, weapons systems. We've essentially created a military force that grows exponentially and can adapt to local conditions automatically. Director Hayes whistled softly. How many units do we currently have? Every colony ship launched in the past 6 months has carried 50 units, Dr. Kim answered. That's approximately 3,000 units already positioned throughout human space and beyond. Additionally, we've seeded another 2,000 units in unoccupied systems along likely invasion routes. Secretary Johnson did quick calculations on his tablet. If my math is correct, in 30 days we'll have over 8 billion self-replicating military units, and they'll be building at an exponential rate from there. That's conservative, Dr. Kim agreed. The real advantage isn't just numbers, though. It's adaptability and distribution. Destroy a traditional fleet, and it's gone. Destroy half our manufacturing units, and the other half will have replaced the losses within a week. More importantly, every unit learns from every engagement and shares that knowledge instantaneously with every other unit. President Santos leaned back in her chair, processing the information. Why wasn't I informed of this capability earlier? Because until Ambassador Chen's report, it was theoretical, Admiral Patterson replied. We knew we might face hostile aliens eventually, but we hoped diplomacy would work. Prometheus was our insurance policy. And now, Dr. Kim changed the display to show a galactic map with human space highlighted in blue and council territories in various other colors. Now we have 47 hours to decide whether to activate our insurance policy or accept terms that will essentially end human independence forever. The display zoomed in on human space, showing the locations of colonies, manufacturing centers, and defense installations. What caught everyone's attention were the thousands of tiny red dots scattered throughout the region and beyond, each that represents a cluster of Prometheus units, Dr. Kim explained. As of this moment, we have the capability to begin exponential military production in over 200 star systems, including 50 systems the Council doesn't know we've reached. Director Hayes activated his own display, showing intercepted Council communications. Our intelligence suggests the Council believes our military strength is limited to what they can observe directly. Approximately 400 major warships, 43 fortified worlds, and conventional manufacturing capabilities. They have no idea about Prometheus, and their surveillance technology isn't designed to detect units in dormant mode. President Santos studied the displays, weighing humanity's options. What's the assessment of our chances if we activate Prometheus? Admiral Patterson consulted his tactical projections. In the short term, we'll be massively outgunned. They can bring overwhelming force to bear against any specific target. But if Dr. Kim's projections are accurate, within 60 days we'll have numerical superiority, and within 6 months we'll have such overwhelming numerical superiority that they won't be able to engage us directly without catastrophic losses. That assumes they don't have weapons or technologies we don't know about, Secretary Johnson pointed out. They do, Director Hayes confirmed. But our analysis suggests their greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. They've maintained galactic peace for 10,000 years through overwhelming technological superiority and diplomatic pressure. They've never faced a peer-level threat, let alone an exponentially scaling one. Dr. Kim changed the display again, showing comparative technological analyses. Their individual technologies are more advanced than ours in most areas. But technology isn't everything. They're fighting the last war, not the one we're about to bring them. President Santos activated her direct communication link with Ambassador Chen. Sarah, what's your assessment of the Council's psychological state? How committed are they to their ultimatum? Chen's image considered the question carefully. They're absolutely convinced they're dealing with a typical emerging species that will either submit or be destroyed like the 17 previous species they've neutralized. They show no awareness that we might represent a fundamentally different kind of threat. More importantly, their entire political structure is based on the assumption that they maintain overwhelming superiority. Any challenge to that assumption could destabilize their entire system. Meaning they can't afford to let us succeed, Chen replied. If we resist and survive, every protectorate species in the galaxy will know that the Council can be defied. That's an existential threat to their entire civilization. Admiral Patterson nodded grimly. So, this isn't just about humanity. It's about whether the galactic order they've maintained for 10 millennia continues to exist. Which means there's no middle ground, President Santos realized. We either submit completely or we fight to the finish. Director Hayes activated another display showing economic and social analyses of Council species. There's another factor to consider. The Council's system has produced incredible stability, but it's also produced stagnation. Most protectorate species have been at essentially the same technological and social level for centuries. They've traded growth and innovation for security and peace. And Secretary Johnson prompted. And humans are the opposite of stagnant, Dr. Kim answered. We've achieved in 90 years what most species take millennia to accomplish. Our rate of technological advancement is unprecedented in galactic history. If we submit to their system, we'll not only lose our independence, we'll lose the drive that makes us human. President Santos stood and walked to the window overlooking the defense complex. Outside, she could see the lights of ships launching for the outer colonies, carrying families and dreams and the hope of building something better among the stars. Admiral Patterson, she said without turning around, if we activate Prometheus, what's our strategy? Asymmetric warfare on a galactic scale, Patterson replied immediately. We avoid direct fleet engagements where they have overwhelming advantages. Instead, we target their logistics, their communication networks, their isolated outposts. We force them to defend everything while we can attack anywhere. Their response will be to target Earth and our primary colonies, Secretary Johnson warned. Which is why we don't keep our eggs in one basket, Dr. Kim added. Prometheus units can establish hidden manufacturing bases and systems they don't even know exist. Even if they destroy every known human world, we can rebuild our entire civilization from scratch in a matter of months. President Santos turned back to face the table. Sarah, I need you to understand something. If I give the order to activate Prometheus, you and your delegation will be trapped on that station when hostilities begin. The Council will either hold you hostage or... She didn't finish the sentence. Ambassador Chen's expression didn't change. Madam President, I volunteered for this assignment knowing the risks. If my sacrifice helps preserve human freedom, then it's a worthwhile trade. But I don't think it will come to that. Explain. The Council expects us to either submit or resist conventionally. They have protocols for dealing with both responses. What they don't have protocols for is an enemy that appears to submit and then reveals overwhelming force. If we can maintain the deception long enough, we might be able to neutralize their leadership before they can coordinate a response. Admiral Patterson leaned forward intently. You're talking about a decapitation strike. I'm talking about ending this war before it starts, Chen replied. This station has representatives from every major Council species. If something were to happen to their leadership, that's assuming we can get weapons onto the station, Director Hayes pointed out. Security there is absolute. Dr. Himsimidet, who said anything about getting weapons onto the station. Prometheus units are designed to be undetectable until activated. A single unit could be disguised as anything from a piece of furniture to a food container. President Santos felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. In the next few minutes, she would have to choose between comfortable surrender and a war that would reshape the galaxy. Dr. Kim, How quickly can we activate our deployed units? Activation signal goes out immediately. First-generation units come online within 6 hours. Full production capability within 72 hours. Admiral Patterson, how long do we need to maintain the deception? Ideally, 30 days minimum. That gives us time to establish overwhelming numerical superiority before they realize what's happening. Director Hayes, can we maintain communication security for that long? Unknown. The Council has monitoring capabilities we don't fully understand. But we have quantum encryption protocols they've never seen before. President Santos looked around the table at the faces of people who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity. In all their expressions, she saw the same thing. Determination mixed with the knowledge that they were about to roll the dice for their entire species. Sarah, she said to Ambassador Chen's image, I want you to return to the council chamber tomorrow and accept their offer. The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of ventilation systems. Ma'am, Chen said carefully, accept their offer of protectorate status. Tell them humanity is grateful for their wisdom and protection. Be as convincing as you can. Understanding dawned on Chen's face. And then, President Santos activated her command authority and entered her authorization codes into the quantum communication system. And then we show them why peaceful species should never threaten humans who just want to be left alone. She turned to Dr. Kim. Activate Prometheus. All units, all systems, maximum production priority. Yes, ma'am. Activation signal transmitting now. To Admiral Patterson. Begin covert deployment of our concealed assets. I want strike capability positioned throughout Council space. Understood. Fleet dispersal beginning immediately. To Director Hayes, I want intelligence on every Council leader, every major installation, every strategic vulnerability. If they want to play the game of threats and ultimatums, they're about to learn that humans have been playing that game a lot longer than they have. Already in progress, ma'am. President Santos turned back to Ambassador Chen's image. Sarah, can you maintain the deception for 30 days? I can maintain it for as long as necessary, Chen replied firmly. But what happens when they realize we've been preparing for war while accepting their protection? President Santos smiled, and it was the expression of a species that had clawed its way to the top of its world's food chain and had no intention of stepping down. Then they'll learn the difference between a species that fights because it's conquered others and a species that fights because it refuses to be conquered by anyone. The activation signal for Project Prometheus traveled at quantum speeds across hundreds of light years, reaching dormant units scattered throughout the galaxy. On asteroids and moons and hidden bases that the Council didn't know existed, metallic spheres began to unfold and start building. The galaxy's 10,000-year peace was about to come to an end, and the beings who had maintained it through superior technology and diplomatic intimidation were about to face something they had never encountered before, a species that would rather die fighting than live kneeling. Humanity had made its choice. Now, the universe would live with the consequences. Ambassador Sarah Chun stood before the council chamber's massive doors, her diplomatic credentials glowing softly in the scanner as security systems verified her identity. Behind her, General Reed and Dr. Vasquez waited in respectful silence, their faces carefully composed to hide the storm of activity that had consumed human space for the past 18 hours. The Prometheus activation signal had been sent. Across the galaxy, thousands of dormant units were awakening and beginning their exponential reproduction cycles. In 30 days, humanity would possess a military force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. But first, they had to survive 30 days of pretending to be a defeated species grateful for alien protection. The chamber doors opened with their characteristic deep hum, revealing the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Sarah walked to the human platform with measured steps, projecting the demeanor of someone who had accepted reality and was prepared to make the best of it. Council Speaker Thexvar's crystalline form caught the chamber's light as he gestured for attention. Ambassador Chun, we welcome your return. Have you consulted with your government regarding the Council's generous offer? Yes, Council Speaker, Sarah replied, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. The human government has given careful consideration to your proposal, and I am authorized to provide our official response. The chamber fell silent. Thousands of eyes, optical sensors, and other sensory organs focused on the small human figure standing at the center of galactic attention. After extensive deliberation, Sarah began, the human government recognizes the wisdom and experience represented by the Galactic Council. We understand that our rapid expansion and technological development has caused concern among established civilizations. She paused, allowing the translation systems to convey her words to every species present. In her earpiece, she could hear the subtle variations as the message was adapted for different linguistic structures and cultural contexts. Therefore, she continued, humanity formally accepts the Council's offer of protectorate status under the joint administration of the Karath Empire and the Vex Collective. We are grateful for the opportunity to learn from more advanced civilizations and contribute to galactic peace under your guidance. The reaction was immediate and varied. Several representatives nodded or displayed species-specific signs of approval. Others seemed surprised that humanity had chosen submission over destruction. A few appeared disappointed, as if they had been looking forward to the spectacle of another neutralization. Thexvar's crystal form brightened with what might have been satisfaction. The Council is pleased by humanity's wisdom. This decision demonstrates the maturity necessary for eventual integration into galactic civilization. We appreciate the Council's patience with our aggressive tendencies, Sarah replied, injecting just the right amount of humility into her voice. We understand that our history of warfare and rapid expansion was concerning. We hope to learn more peaceful methods of growth under Council guidance. War Commander Vectar leaned forward in his seat, his reptilian features displaying what might have been suspicion or simple interest. What assurances can humanity provide that you will comply with the terms of protectorate status? Sarah had expected this question. General Reed will provide a detailed timeline for the decommissioning of our military vessels larger than patrol boats. Dr. Vasquez has prepared comprehensive data on our current technological development programs, all of which will be placed under Council oversight as specified in your agreement. General Reed stepped forward, activating a holographic display that showed the current disposition of human military forces. The data was accurate as far as it went, but it represented only the forces the Council already knew about. Hidden bases, concealed manufacturing facilities, and the Prometheus network remained invisible to their sensors. The Human Defense Force currently operates 437 vessels classified as destroyers or larger. Reed reported in a professional tone that gave no hint of his true feelings. We can begin decommissioning operations immediately upon ratification of the Protectorate Agreement. Estimated timeline for full compliance is 90 standard days. 90 days seems excessive. Counselor Hithran of the Vex Collective chittered. Your military infrastructure should be dismantled more rapidly to prevent any misunderstandings. Dr. Vasquez joined the presentation, calling up technical specifications on human shipyards and manufacturing facilities. Honor Counselor, the process involves more than simply scrapping vessels. Many of our larger ships contain technologies and materials that can be repurposed for civilian use. We estimate that careful dismantling will allow us to redirect those resources to colony development and infrastructure improvement. An admirable goal, Thexvar agreed. However, the Council requires more immediate assurance of humanity's peaceful intentions. We propose the immediate deployment of monitoring stations to your primary colonies, with full access to your military installations during the transition period. Sarah nodded, as if this were a reasonable request, rather than an intolerable violation of human sovereignty. We understand the Council's security concerns. We can provide facility access and establish communication protocols for your monitoring teams within 72 hours of agreement ratification. What she didn't mention was that human intelligence had been preparing for this possibility for months. Every installation the Council would be allowed to see had been carefully sanitized. Any technology or information they couldn't be permitted to discover had already been moved to facilities that didn't officially exist. There's another matter, Vector interjected. Our intelligence indicates that humanity has established colonies and systems beyond those officially reported. Full compliance with protectorate status requires complete transparency regarding your territorial expansion. This was the critical moment. Sarah knew that humanity's hidden colonies and manufacturing bases were essential to their survival strategy, but she also knew that the Council suspected their existence. "You are correct, War Commander," she admitted with apparent reluctance. "Our colonial expansion records include 12 additional settlements that were not included in our initial reports. We hope to negotiate from a stronger position by minimizing the apparent scope of our expansion." She activated her own display, showing the locations of colonies that human intelligence had determined the Council probably already knew about. The real hidden settlements, the ones that would serve as the foundation for humanity's resistance, remained concealed. "Deception is never admirable," Thexvar said with what might have been disappointment. "However, we appreciate your honesty in correcting this omission. These additional colonies will, of course, be included in the Protectorate administration." "Of course," Sarah agreed. "We understand that our attempt at deception reflects poorly on our readiness for galactic citizenship. We hope to demonstrate better judgment under Council guidance." The next 2 hours involved detailed discussions of administrative procedures, oversight protocols, and integration timelines. Sarah answered every question with apparent cooperation while carefully avoiding any commitments that would interfere with humanity's hidden preparations. Throughout the negotiations, she maintained a careful balance, submissive enough to convince the Council that humanity had genuinely accepted defeat, but not so submissive as to arouse suspicion about the completeness of their surrender. "There is one final matter," Counselor Marathak of the Hydrons gurgled through his translation unit. "The Council has decided that humanity's rapid technological advancement represents a security concern even under protectorate status. All research into advanced propulsion, weapons systems, and artificial intelligence must be suspended immediately." Dr. Vasquez looked genuinely pained, which wasn't difficult since the Order represented everything she had dedicated her career to opposing. "Honored Counselor, some of our research programs represent decades of investment and could have significant civilian applications. Might we request a grace period to document our work and identify technologies suitable for peaceful development?" 30 standard days, Hithran decided after consulting with her fellow Vex representatives. After that period, all advanced research facilities will be placed under direct Council oversight. Any attempt to continue prohibited research will result in immediate termination of protectorate status. "Understood," Dr. Vasquez replied. "We will prepare comprehensive documentation of all current projects for Council review." What she didn't mention was that the 30-day grace period was exactly what they needed. By the time the Council's oversight began, the Prometheus network would be fully operational, and humanity's real military capabilities would be beyond anything their new protectors could imagine. As the formal session concluded, Thexvar made a pronouncement that was clearly intended for broader distribution. "Let this day mark the beginning of humanity's integration into galactic civilization. Under the wisdom and protection of the Council, this young species will learn to contribute to the peace and prosperity that has blessed the galaxy for 10,000 years." The assembled representatives responded with various forms of approval and congratulation. To them, this was another successful diplomatic resolution, another potential threat transformed into a managed asset. Sarah bowed respectfully to the Council leadership, maintaining her role as the grateful representative of a defeated species. "The human government thanks the Council for this opportunity. We look forward to learning from your wisdom and contributing to galactic peace. As the human delegation left the chamber, Sarah caught a glimpse of satisfaction on many alien faces. They had done it again, they believed. Another aggressive young species had been brought to heel through the careful application of diplomatic pressure and the implicit threat of overwhelming force. In the corridor outside, Dr. Vasquez whispered urgently, "How long do we have to maintain this act?" 29 days, 7 hours, and 16 minutes, General Reed replied without looking at his chronometer. "Then we find out if our gamble pays off." Sarah nodded, but her mind was already moving to the next phase of the deception. Over the next month, human space would be crawling with council monitoring teams, all watching for signs of resistance or deception. Every action, every communication, every resource allocation would be scrutinized for evidence that humanity was planning something other than peaceful integration. Meanwhile, in systems the council didn't know existed, Prometheus units were already beginning their exponential reproduction. Within days, the network would number in the millions. Within weeks, billions. And all of it would remain invisible to the very beings who believed they had just secured humanity's submission. That evening, in the privacy of their quarters, Sarah activated a quantum-encrypted communication linked to Earth. President Santos' image appeared in the small holographic display, her expression carefully neutral. "Status report, Ambassador. The deception is holding, Madam President. They believe we've accepted defeat and are grateful for their protection. Council monitoring teams will begin deployment to our primary colonies within 72 hours. And our hidden assets remain concealed. The Council's intelligence is impressive, but not comprehensive. They know about the systems we wanted them to know about, and they remain ignorant of our real capabilities." President Santos nodded. Dr. Kim reports that Prometheus reproduction is ahead of schedule. Current estimates suggest we'll have numerical superiority in 23 days rather than 30. Any signs that the Council suspects our true intentions? None. Their monitoring technology is sophisticated, but it's designed to detect conventional military buildups. Self-replicating manufacturing units operating in stealth mode are outside their experience. Sarah felt a moment of satisfaction, but it was tempered by the knowledge of what was coming. "Madam President, when we reveal our true capabilities, there won't be any going back. The galaxy will never be the same. Understand, Sarah? But the alternative is watching our children grow up as subjects of beings who think freedom is a privilege they can grant or withhold at will. That's not acceptable." The communication ended, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the weight of what humanity was attempting. In less than a month, they would reveal to the galaxy that the grateful species accepting Council protection had been building the largest military force in galactic history. The Council had maintained 10,000 years of peace through superior technology and the threat of overwhelming force. They were about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who appears to have already surrendered. Outside her window, the nebula continued its eternal dance of gas and starlight, beautiful and indifferent to the plans being made in its shadow. Soon, that beauty would be marred by the fires of war, and the galaxy's ancient order would face its first real challenge. Humanity had bought itself 30 days through deception and careful planning. Now, they had to make those 30 days count, because when the truth was revealed, there would be no second chances. The greatest military buildup in galactic history was taking place in the shadows, hidden from the very beings who believed they had just prevented a war. In a few weeks, they would learn the price of forcing a choice between freedom and submission on a species that valued freedom more than survival. Sarah Chun had done her part. The deception was in place, the timeline was set, and humanity's real response to the Council's ultimatum was growing exponentially in star systems they didn't know existed. Soon, very soon, the galaxy would discover what happened when you threatened a species that had spent its entire history learning how to fight.